right now we got the worst punishments in human history. Lock in for the reaction. Let's freaking go, YouTube. Let's lock in. It's the OG Ethan. We're about to react to this. Feel me? Let's lock in.
With the bad and slowly work our way towards the stuff of nightmares. Number 10, the Rat Dungeon. If you were alive in London, England during the medieval period, you would have definitely heard about the Rat Dungeon. Since this
Dude, back then they used to skin people and stuff for like torture methods, bro. This is about to be some nefarious.
Schmidt struck paralyzing fear into the hearts of even the most hardened criminals. This was a cell that was located at the bottom of the London Tower, where prisoners were shackled and chained in complete darkness. But here's the thing, the dungeon was connected to the nearby river and just below the river's waterline, so that when the water levels rose, all the rats that lived along the riverbed would be pushed out of their shelters and forced to swim downstream. This would of course leave the
Oh, and the rats would like crawl on him and nibble on him till he dies.
Hungry and angry rats towards the entrance of the dungeon, where they would then come face to face with the prisoner. But to the unlucky prisoner, he never actually saw anything, and all he would hear were the soft scurries.
Wait, he was blind while all this was happening? So this guy's just blind and the rats are just nibbling on his skin, bro. Think about that. Bro,
the rat's feet entering the dungeon. And in a matter of minutes, these soft noises were in the hundreds and all around him. These angry and aggressive rats would then begin to take small bites from the prisoner, who had no way of defending himself. Now he might be able to shake the rats off for a few hours.
What's he gonna do? He's chained up.
But eventually the prisoner would pass out from pure exhaustion. And while he's
Dude, how do you pass out from exhaustion? You're getting eaten alive by rats.
Slept, the rats would continue to take bites from his flesh. Eventually, when he would wake up, he would discover hundreds of bites throughout his entire body. But it didn't stop there. The prisoner was
stop there. Days! Yo, there's like at least 30 days on there.
Left here for days or weeks on end, depending on his crime. But towards the end of the medieval period, this form of punishment just got more and more deranged, eventually becoming a form of execution, where prisoners
Dude, that's not even being executed. That's being eaten alive and tortured by rats. Dude, did people not have any like morals back then or anything? They just said, fuck it, I'm putting you to the rat chamber. Oh my
in the dungeon and forgotten about. Number 9, the Rat.
And that's just number 10. That's literally just number 10.
This was yet another punishment that took place in the London Tower. The rack was a torture device that was used in many places throughout history. This form of punishment was originally designed for getting a confession, usually from criminals.
Yeah, but like, what if he's telling the truth the whole time and they're like, nah, fam, you're lying. You're lying. And they continue just to like edge your body parts just over and over. Tell us the truth. I'm telling the truth. He's not telling the truth, but he really is.
Slaves or prisoners of war. The device looked...
Like, what do they do? How do they find out he's telling the truth, bro?
Looked like a large ladder, but instead of secure steps, they would actually rotate like a rolling pin. You see, when a prisoner was placed on the rack, he would have his feet and wrists tied to a ratchet pulley system, where...
Why is he blushing?
2 legal officials would slowly tighten the ropes and locking them in place, placing an increasing amount of strain on the prisoner's shoulders, hips, knees, and elbows with every single turn. This was all done to get information, but of course, a lot of the times the truth was not accepted as reality.
That's what I'm saying. Like, what if you're telling the truth the whole time? Like, bro, the king is over there in the kingdom and shit. Please get him, spare my life. But they're like, nah, fam, you're capping.
And the prisoner would then begin to say whatever he believed the officials wanted to hear. Sometimes it would work and the prisoners would be let go, while other times they would be tortured even more for lying. When the whole ordeal was over, prisoners were usually released with dislocated joints, but oftentimes they were left completely paralyzed. That was the case in England in 1447 when a 25-year-old girl named Anne Askew would be tortured on the rack for hours and hours on end and left completely paralyzed after all her joints were dislocated. She was then carried on a chair and burned alive at the stake.
She was pulled apart on the little pull wheel thingy, paralyzed, and then they burned her at the stake. Yo, what type of crap were they smoking
because she read and memorized scriptures from the Bible, which she preached in private to a small group of women, which were the exact women she refused to name and expose during her torture. You see, during this time period, if you follow any religion other than the Catholic Church, you better not say a word to anybody, including your own husband, which was the person that turned her in. Number 8. Keel hauling. This brutal punishment was carried out at sea
Own husband? Nah, fam.
on
Me
sailors
personally,
who
bro,
would
I'm
steal
finding
or
her
be
out.
violent
I'm
towards
finding him out, bro.
others and would usually result in death. Keel hauling would start with a sailor having his arms tied with the
Oh, like they're walking the plank like they do in the movies.
rope, then looped around the entire circumference of the ship before being tied off to his feet. The sailor would then be thrown overboard.
He would get dragged in the water while hanging off of the boat.
While the group of men on board
hold on.
pulled on the rope to slowly drag
Why are you smiling, dude? Bro, you're getting pulled apart.
him around the outside of the ship, including over the keel, which is how this punishment gets its name. But a lot of the times, the sailor wouldn't even have to worry about it.
That's literally like
since
the
they were dead
edge of the
before they
boat.
ever reached it. Kinda just depends on how hard the guys on the rope feel like working that day.
And then he's just
Not
stacking
only
on
would
a
the
banana.
sailors be drowning and getting their backs and necks broken on the keel, they were also getting sliced apart like a cheese grater by all the sharp barnacles on the outside of the ship. But if by some miracle a sailor actually happens
His eyes out. He's not alive. And he's still smiling.
to make it all the way around the ship without dying, one of three things will happen. 1, he would be sent for round 2 and for sure be dead by then. 2, be freed and allowed back on the ship.
He doesn't look like he's free. His eye is out. He has an arm cut off. His entire eye is purple. He can't even see.
Where he would
At that point, just kill me, bro.
then slowly die to infections.
They would just let him die to infection. Dude, what if the other crew members got infected, though? You're gonna let him die to infection, but like, bro, what if you get sick too? And just
Or
die?
3, live the rest of his life single and being made fun of since he was now fully covered in scars from head to toe. Number 7.
Me personally, dude, if I was covered in scars head to toe, bro, that's aura. Just be like, yeah, I got this, like, you feel me? I got torture type stuff, you feel me? I got that scar right now. Yeah, that one's for when they put a thorn up my ass and they just twisted it up and down. Feel that? Yeah, dude, that's aura.
Crushed by
Nothing.
elephants. Now we are getting to the part of the list where living is no longer an option. This form of punishment has been used by many countries throughout history, but was most recently used by India in the 19th century, which is really not that long ago if you really think about it. Like, your great-grandma could have witnessed one of these. What type of crimes would you have to commit to be crushed by an elephant, you might ask? Well, apparently
I'm not gonna lie, this is probably the least devastating one so far. Because the other ones you're like actively feeling the pain before you die, bro. If an elephant stomps on your head, bro, it's lights out. It's like getting a gunshot to the head, bro. Like you can't, boom, you're dead. Half a second. Unless you're like being stomped on over and over. But like, can you really feel it if you're like, bro, the air's gonna be blown out of you?
if you failed to pay your taxes, that was good
don't really-
enough. And of course, stealing or being an enemy soldier was also a great way to become a tortilla. But the most
Wait, if you didn't pay your taxes back then, they didn't just evict you, an elephant stomped on your head?
disturbing case in history was when the 4th Mughal
Who elected
emperor of
these guys,
India
bro?
ordered an enormous amount of criminals to be crushed to death in a single day, simply because he was bored and
He was bored?
needed some entertainment. The
I
guy who
guess.
forgot to pay his taxes, crushed. The man who stole an apple from the local market, crushed.
An apple. Yo, fam, you took an apple, your head's getting crushed by an elephant. In what correlation does this make sense? Thank God these guys aren't in
The
office
little
today, bro.
orphan who
On everything.
jaywalked across the street, crushed. The man
Jaywalk.
who murdered his neighbor and added his remains to a large pot of tomato soup, then fed that soup to his family and watched them eat it from the shadows with a creepy smirk on his face. He's alright.
So they're letting him pass, but not the dude who stole an apple.
Apparently he makes a damn good soup. There are a few ways that this public execution goes down, but one thing always stays the same.
I'm glad I
There's
live in
always
the
a guy
US,
on
bro.
top of the elephant controlling its every move. And this was very intentional, as this was meant to showcase just how amazing the ruling class were. I mean, look at them. They can control an elephant. Now be impressed.
That's Loki World.
The first method of execution was the one that you better pray for if this was going to be your fate.
Yeah, just getting
Here
your
the
head stomped on, bro. Dude, God forbid they're like, get him limb by limb. I want his arm off, then his leg, then his penis, then his other arm.
Criminals
Yo,
would have their arms tied behind their back and their
That's, like,
heads placed on a
terrible, bro.
pedestal, where it was then crushed like a grape by the
Boom.
elephant's
Dead.
foot. Now,
It's
the
like a
second
gunshot.
method is much more cruel. The criminal would be placed flat on the floor with their arms tied behind their backs. Then the elephants would be guided to walk over the person's body, and hopefully the criminal would die on the first go.
hopefully. Dude, imagine he steps on his foot.
But sometimes they just end up crushing a leg or an arm.
Dude,
so the elephant then has to make a U-turn.
I would pray he steps on my head, bro.
And try again and again and again. The final and worst way is when a highly trained elephant was guided to slowly crush the person limb by limb. They would first crush the arms, then the legs, and then poke holes in them with the tusk until eventually dealing the final blow to the head or torso. This is the more theatrical route that rulers like the fourth Mogul love to take, and made for a truly traumatizing experience for everyone. Except for the fourth Mogul. He loved it. Number 6. Impalement. Probably one of the grossest and most cruel forms of punishment on the list. This has been used by a few countries throughout history, but was most recently used in Egypt in the 17th century, usually against criminals that were highway robbers, grave thieves, or anyone who would try and start a rebellion. This punishment would start by having a criminal lay flat on their stomachs with their arms tied behind their back. They would then be sliced open with a razor to increase the size of their back door. And as soon as the incision was made, the cut would be lathered with paste to instantly stop the blood. They would then thrust in a long wooden stake that was the width of a man's arm, which
What's his face? He's moaning to it.
Tapered on one end. They then begin to hit the wooden stake.
Yo! Animator, you know what you're doing.
With the mallet, pushing it further and further in. And of course,
it's in his butt.
Greased up beforehand to make this process a lot smoother.
Dude, it's a grist mine with a spike on it.
And once the stake has popped out of the criminal's shoulder, head, or mouth, they were pretty much long gone. He is then planted next to a big
yo, that's TOS. That's gotta be TOS.
To remind everyone that this is what happens.
It's in his butt and it went out of his mouth. Yo.
Happens when you break the law. They will be left.
Dude, look how traumatized the child is to the right. His eyes were bloodshot, 1,000-yard stare.
And removed the following morning before the body begins to stink. But wait, there's another version of this as well. You see, on some occasions, the criminals would only be impaled just deep enough to keep them in place, but not too deep.
Look at the guy's face. He's enjoying it. Yo, is this guy LGTV?
Deep that it would cause immediate death.
He's LGTV, literally.
They would do this by having stakes that had a seated position on them to prevent the person from sliding down any further.
Imagine taking the one to the right. It's halfway in your butt. Ooh, there's another penis to the left. And then there's a bump on the right. Dude, you're fried.
They would then be placed on a busy road where they would suffer for hours and hours, pleading to people walking by for help, until eventually succumbing to their wounds.
They'd let their children watch that?
Poena culae. Poena culae is Latin for penalty of the sack. And that's exactly what it was, just a lot more terrifying and cruel. This was an exclusive punishment for anyone that would murder their own family members.
This is the only valid one though. Like, bro, if you're murdering your mom or something, bro, or like you kill your dad or your grandma, like, dude, expect to get the death sentence, dude. This is the only valid one. The other one said, if you steal an apple, you're gonna get your head stomped on by an elephant. This is the only valid reason
seen in the 2nd century in Rome, but would later be used by the Germans in the 18th century. This all begins with a convicted murderer being placed inside a thick leather bag. But just to make sure the man isn't lonely, they would then add a dog, a rooster, a viper, and a monkey. I don't know what these animals did to deserve this, but hey, at least the evil family murder.
I feel like the most dangerous one is probably the monkey. Bro, have you seen, like, no, not seen, but like, bro, there's stories of people dying by monkeys? It is, bro.
Doesn't die alone. Once all the animals are added inside the bag, it is then sewn shut, creating an almost airtight seal. Now you would think this would be horrible enough, but no, this is just the beginning. Because as soon as the bag is sewn shut, it is then tossed into the ocean. But don't worry, later on...
No, bro, the like animals on the inside of the bag are gonna drown now, bro. That's a waste of animals.
These murderers would be given the option to either be placed inside the leather bag or be sent to perform at the Colosseum, where
if you pick the Colosseum, it's low-key aura, I can't lie. Bro, you're fighting to the death, though.
They can perform the act of being...
That's like
being mauled to death in front of all of their loved ones and peers. You know, at least they had the option. Number 4.
I feel like I'd rather get my face clawed off by a bear than have a monkey, dog, and a snake chew at me while I'm drowning to death. I don't know. I feel like it's kind of painless if a bear just punches your head off. I don't know.
This is one of the most sick punishments in all of human history, and it involves the use of rats. I will cover 2 of them here as they are very
Dude, at least like 3 or 4 of these have had rats in them, bro.
similar. The first use of this form of punishment dates back to 1568 during the 80 Years' War.
Dude, all these are in like the 16th, 17th, and 18th century.
A Dutch leader named Diederik Sonoy would often use this method of punishment, which involved placing a rat inside of a clay bowl, then placing it topside down on a prisoner's stomach, chest, face, or groin.
Yo! Nah!
Then
on the
the back of the bowl would be heated with either a torch or some coals, causing the rat to go into a full-on panic, trying to escape from the
Jesus, pooping.
heat, and its only way out was to burrow into the human. Once inside, it would continue to chew and tear apart whatever was in its way, desperately searching for a way out. Eventually, the rat finds its way out of the maze and survives. The same could not be said for the prisoner. But the second method was much, much worse and was highly secretive since it was used under the guidance of the dictator Augusto Pinochet, where he held power from 1976.
They were doing this in the 70s?
Through 19...
Dude, I thought this was only like 1600s or like the 1500s where they didn't have technology to like actually torture people.
83. They called it the rectoscope, and I'm sure...
The rectum? The rat, yo, I'm just gonna guess right here, the rat went up his ass and burrowed inside of it.
You have already figured out where this is going.
Yep,
yes,
absolutely.
It's exactly what you think. They would place a tube on a prisoner's back door, then insert a rat inside of the tube. The rat would then begin to burrow its way in. These people were so sick that they...
Why is he blushing on the left, dude? Again, same with the one with a thorn going up his butt. Why are you moaning and blushing? It does not feel that good.
Actually expected the prisoners to answer questions while this was going on. Eventually, the rat would find its way in and begin to move forward to find its way out. Nobody really knows how many people died from this punishment, but we do know that a ton of people went missing when this dictator was in charge.
Yeah, but again, though, like, what if he answers all the questions correctly and they're like, Cap, they just continue to burrow rats in his booty. Like, you feel me? Like, he slimes all of his homeboys out by saying, yeah, he just rats on all of his homeboys. Proceeds to put the rat up his butt, even though he just exposed everybody. Like, what if they're like, I already said this during the thorn one.
Gibbeting. The last known use was in the early 1900s in Afghanistan.
Didn't they used to do this? Like, they would publicly do it too?
It all came to light in 1921 when the National Geographic published this image in their magazine.
Yeah.
This was also used in the United States from time to time during the 17th and 18th century. One notable example was in Boston, Massachusetts, where a few pirates were hung at the Boston Harbor, which served as a warning to any sailors that were approaching
I was about to say, Boston. Yeah, they were like publicly doing this to any like pirates or like tyrannies and stuff, and people who've committed like crimes and shit. They would just publicly do this to induce fear and stuff.
Now let's talk about England, since they love this form of punishment so much. In England, this was used on traitors, murderers, pirates, and thieves. But after the year 1752, the Murder Act was passed, which required that all convicted murderers must be put to death by being publicly dissected or by gibbeting of some sort.
Give me the gibbet. Publicly dissected? Yeah, but this is valid though. Like, they've murdered somebody. The other one, dude stole an apple or jaywalked. They would just get their elephants.
And over 134 confirmed people met this fate. The most common form of gibbeting were actually cages, and they looked like this. It was an all steel.
Dude, and people, I think when this happened, people would like spit on them too, or like throw rocks at them until they just died, bro.
Cage that was shaped tightly to the form of a human body, which was so tight that it would not allow the person inside to move. They were then hung 30 feet or more off the floor, usually on a public road or water hole, to ensure that the most amount of people could witness this monstrosity. But I could only assume this was more annoying than anything, since every time you get thirsty and needed to fill up your container of water, you would have to deal with the dying man begging you for a sip.
Some dude on the floor just rage baits him. Look what I got, boy. And he's just like thirsting to death, and he just got water on the floor.
Over here!
But the annoyance and torture of the public didn't stop there, because after the criminals would die in the cages, the body would be left inside to rot for years and years on end.
Yeah, but what if you go to a restaurant and stuff and you just go outside to take a breath of fresh air and you just smell ass because the body's rotting? Dude, I feel bad for the public who had to deal with the smell.
With the locals complaining that the smell of death was so
I freaking called it, bro.
that they couldn't even sleep at night.
Yeah.
There's even been reports that some human remains stayed inside of these cages for over 20 years.
20 years? So the public had to deal with stench outside for 20 years straight.
Before a government official would finally remember
outlaw
to clean
shit,
it
bro.
out.
Outlaw.
Number 2, scaphism. This was a form of punishment that was used by the
What the hell
ancient
was that?
Persian Empire on anyone that would be convicted of murder. First, the criminal would be placed inside of a boat on their backs and tied down. The boat had 4 holes cut out so that the person's arms and legs would be outside of the boat and in the water. They were then force-fed large quantities of honey and milk until their stomachs were visibly full. They would then proceed to lather their entire body with the milk and honey as well.
I think this was to like attract the insects and stuff. They would just like burrow in his eye, like, you feel me, bro? The honey.
After all these steps were completed, he was then pushed out to the middle of the lake where he was completely exposed to the heat of the sun. But the sun would soon become the least of his worries. You see, the reason they fed him milk and honey was not because it was a great last meal, but because this combination causes the person to get extreme diarrhea, which mixed with the sweet honey attracts rodents, bugs, wasps, bees, flies, and whatever other animals live near the lake.
Dude, that might be the worst one. I'm not even lying. That might be the worst one. Dude, you have like urine, poop, throw up all over you with honey and milk, and there's just rats and bugs, and like everything's just eating you alive. This might be the worst one. Either this one or the thorn getting stuck up your butt.
After being tormented by the animals throughout the entire night, you would think that the daytime maybe gets a little better. No, because as soon as the sun rises the following day, the person inside of the boat gets another gigantic meal of milk and
fed the
honey and an additional lathering. This would be done on a daily basis to prolong the punishment for as long as possible.
Yeah, but what if the dude's trying to lather him back up, just like... It's disgusting, right? Because they got gory freaking wounds all over him and they're just touching on it.
It was also well documented that the rodents would continuously attempt to burrow inside of the person through their back door. They were probably trying to get a head start.
Yo, a lot of these punishments has to do with something coming up someone's butt. I'm just saying,
next
bro.
Meal.
Pause.
A writer named John Sonaris wrote in great detail about one of these incidents. He would go on to say that it was one of the most horrid and cruel forms of punishment since it was terribly long and seemed to have no end in sight. He wrote about a man who survived for an entire 17 days before he finally died from his wounds. Apparently,
17 days? Dude, this dude was out here for more than 2 weeks getting rats up his ass and honey and bugs and whatever.
His last few days.
How did you last that long? Don't you die without like 2 weeks of water or like a week without water and like a couple weeks without food? I mean, he was getting fed, but like, bro, you have no water.
Face completely covered with wasps and his flesh rotting away, filled with swarms of parasites and worms, all while being covered in his own filth. Number 1, the oubliette. Oubliette simply means to forget in French. This was a punishment that was used in many places throughout history, including in the London Tower, which had a small and confined room called Little Ease. Not only was this room pitch black, it was also so small that prisoners could not sit, stand, or lay down while inside it, and they would be left in this uncomfortable position for days on end. One of the most famous oubliettes is not the one in the London Tower, but in the neighboring district of Warwick, inside of Warwick Castle. Here, deep underground in the castle's dungeon.
Oh yeah, cause like, bro, when people explore castles and stuff, like detectives and like archaeologists and whatnot, bro, they like find human remains inside of the walls and shit, and like in caves in the building or like cages and stuff.
Is a very small and narrow cell.
Yo, that's small. Yeah, that like places like that,
made
bro.
of stone, which has a metal door to close it shut. Prisoners were tossed inside the cell and forgotten about, as the name implies. The prisoner would just have to sit there and wait for their inevitable death, which usually came in a few days from dehydration or starvation.
Dude, that's like the least worst one. You could low-key just chill, and then like the last couple days it's like agonizing because you're hungry. But bro, you could just chill and die. I know it probably hurts, but like that's like the least worst one in my opinion.
Now, of course, this would be the best case scenario, because in reality, most of the time there would already be a rotting corpse inside of the cell to keep the new prisoner company. The previous occupier of the cell would serve as a daily reminder of his upcoming fate. But that's not the only companions that he will have, since the underground dungeons are completely infested with rats that have developed a taste for human flesh. But wait, there's more. These oubliettes existed in many of the castles throughout Europe, and in recent times, they have actually discovered these dungeons with dozens, if not
dude, there's like 10,000.
Hundreds of human remains inside of it, as proof that they were hardly ever cleaned. Like in Leap Castle of Ireland, where in 1900, during the castle's renovation, a worker found a small opening behind a wall inside of the chapel.
Facts, dude. There's like 8 deaths on here that have to do with rats just eating somebody. Yo, they was obsessed back then. I can't lie.
This hole had an 8-foot drop that led to a large oubliette, and what the worker found inside shocked him, since it was filled with so many skeletons.
He was shocked. Bro on the top left, Brotato Chip, is smiling and blushing.
That they needed multiple cartloads to clear it all out.
There's not a chance anybody in real life actually looks like that.
But just when you think
he looks like Sloth from Goonies, if you know, you know.
This section is over, it just keeps on giving. You see, there's been many stories of men who have been placed inside one of these dungeons and kept alive for years and years on end.
Yeah, but how do you last years though? Like if you're not getting fed or like you're not getting any water to drink, how do you last years? Are you eating your own poop like and drinking your own pee? I guess.
Surviving off crumbs of food and minimal amounts of water, prolonging their inevitable demise for as long as humanly possible.
Bro, at that point, just give up. Just don't eat anything. Just fall asleep.
These cells were sometimes even placed on ground level so they can hear the voices and laughter of the people outside. An experience that they will never get again in this lifetime.
Damn, bro, you had to have like done something nefarious. Yo, W video, really documentary and educationally. Bro, that was a fire video. Subscribe to Good Enough. That was actually a fire video. I'm giving it like 2 years ago. Fire video. W's. We'll see you guys next time on the other reactions. Gonna post some more clips soon. See you later, YouTube. God bless.